Hello and welcome to Shattered Ice Gaming. This video is the first video in my new series Shattered Thoughts, where I am expanding my scope outside of talking about board games. And this inaugural video is going to be about one of my favourite pro wrestlers of the modern era, and that man is Windham Rotunda, also known as Bray Wyatt. I decided now was the best time to release this video in honour of his passing 2 years ago on the 24th of August 2023. And this is just a short foreword before the video begins properly, because I think it's important for anyone watching this to be aware that I never actually saw Bray Wyatt wrestling. And I don't mean in person, I mean on the television, because at the time that Bray Wyatt was active in the WWE, I actually wasn't watching wrestling. I had a long break from watching wrestling. I always kind of kept up with what had happened with my favourite superstars, such as The Undertaker and Mick Foley from back in the days of the Attitude Era. But I wasn't actually watching their programming for almost 20 years. And so although I've always had an interest in wrestling, I did miss out on the entirety of Windham Rotunda's career. So why am I making a video about him? Well, it's because over the last 8 months or so, when I've been watching a lot of WWE, and I've gone back and watched a lot of the older matches and looked into previous storylines that took place and all that kind of thing, I discovered Windham Rotunda and found him utterly fascinating. And despite being no longer with us, he very quickly became my favourite wrestler of the modern era. So it's important for you to know when watching this that I never had the fortune of experiencing these stories as they were happening, and as such I've had to learn most of this retrospectively. So if you are familiar with Bray Wyatt and you know his story better than I do, then you will probably notice that there will be mistakes and errors in this video when I'm talking about his career. I may get a few dates wrong, I may get the order of some matches wrong, because I have had to learn all of this through watching YouTube videos and various other bits and pieces of his career I can find. So I do apologise for any mistakes, but this isn't really intended as just a retelling of Windham's career. It's intended to discuss the stories he told with his character and the things he did as a wrestler that I find endlessly fascinating, and to discuss what I think is so incredible about the way he told these stories. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy my tribute to who I think is one of the greatest wrestlers and is the Shakespeare of modern wrestling, Windham Rotunda. This man was named Windham Rotunda, known better by his wrestling alias, Bray Wyatt. He would tragically lose his life in 2023 to a heart condition exacerbated by catching COVID-19. But this video isn't about his death, it's a celebration of his life and why he is my favourite pro wrestler of the modern era. This is the story of Bray Wyatt, the narrative genius of the squared circle. If you know anything about pro wrestling, it's that it is a blank canvas on which any portrait can be painted, from the super serious fighters like Goldberg to the wacky and crazy gimmick characters such as Erwin R. Shyster, also known as IRS, a literal taxman in the wrestling ring, and therefore the most evil character ever created, and, interestingly enough, portrayed by Mike Rotunda, the father of Windham Rotunda, Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt strayed more towards the wacky end of this spectrum, but he did it with a certain panache and style that has never been done by anyone before him. The only men to even come close to Wyatt's character work was Mark Calloway, better known as The Undertaker. The thing to know about wrestling is that a wrestler is only as good as the character he portrays on screen. They can have all the in-ring talent and skill in the world, but it makes no difference if their character is dull, boring and flat, with a few exceptions. You see, pro wrestling is like a combination of improv comedy, choreographed ballet and theatre. The fighting you see on screen may be choreographed, the winners of matches predetermined, and the rivalries staged, mostly. I once had someone describe pro wrestling to me as a soap opera for teenage boys, and that stuck with me. Despite being 36 years old now, I still enjoy this soap opera performance, and so I disagree with the part about made for boys, as girls can of course enjoy wrestling, and in recent years more of them do. But the description of a soap opera certainly stayed with me. So what does this have to do with Bray Wyatt? Wyatt was an absolute master of making himself the character you wanted to see in this soap opera. The stories he told through his characters that he created were so engaging and intriguing that when this man spoke to the audience, they all listened. Take, for example, the introduction of the Bray Wyatt character during a 2012 episode of NXT, which was WWE's developmental program, where most of their wrestlers begin their career. Now, Wyatt wasn't Rotunda's first character. That was Husky Harris, not Rotunda's creation, and from what I understand, not one he enjoyed playing. Sometimes, wrestlers are given an on-screen persona by a creative team, and Husky Harris was one such creation. But when Rotunda was given more creative freedom to recreate himself, he entered the NXT arena and introduced himself with this line.
I can only imagine what you people must think of me, man.
He followed this with an amused laugh. It was a fairly standard sort of introduction by a new character, all done to this piece of entrance music. A kind of slow, laid-back, bohemian melody that I can't share with you for copyright reasons, but you can find it on YouTube. Then he follows it up in the same comforting Louisiana southern drawl by saying,
You don't understand me, but you will in time. In time, you'll understand exactly who I am, man. And in time, you'll understand exactly what I am capable of, man.
He followed this with another laugh. A bit more maniacal this time, though. A little bit more unhinged. And then he caps off the whole monologue with this.
And then, and finally then, you'll understand what I am. But for now, I am the angel in the dirt. My name is Bray Wyatt. Pleased to meet you, man.
As introductions go, this one for me is the absolute best. Notice how Bray speaks only to the crowd. He never once addresses his opponent, no threats or taunts. It's as if Aiden English, his opponent, is of no consequence. This gives Wyatt an immediate air of self-assured arrogance. Combine that with his somewhat cryptic monologue, and the audience are already primed to know this guy is going to be a bad guy, a heel. But his words aren't those of a usual heel. There is something about the laughter. He has a secret he's not quite ready to share with us. But as Bray says, he will. In time. That statement is almost like a threat, or maybe, with that lilting drawl and easy way of speaking, a prophecy. Then, there's the odd statement about being an angel in the dirt. What does he mean by this? Is he saying he's a good guy, a scrappy underdog who is at the bottom right now? Or, maybe, just maybe, the only reason an angel will be in the dirt is because it has fallen. Bray Wyatt is in a very subtle way, at least subtle by pro wrestling standards, telling us he is the devil. And to follow this up, he uses the line, "Pleased to meet you, my name is Bray Wyatt," which I believe is an intentional play on the song lyrics, "Pleased to meet you, hope you catch my name," from a song by the Rolling Stones. That song's name? Sympathy for the Devil. I imagine Windham Rotunda spent a long time on this introduction for his new persona, and it really shows. It conveys just the right amount of pleasantry, deception, and menace, with that disquieting laugh that tells us this man is not quite right. Add to this his presentation, wearing a wicker fedora and a Hawaiian shirt that makes him look as if he's just been fishing down in the bayou, and you have this unquantifiable character from Lafayette, Louisiana, that you just know is going to be interesting to watch. And what we would really learn about Bray Wyatt is, unlike most wrestlers, he didn't seem to care if you understood what he was rambling about. It didn't matter to him because he knew what he was talking about. And one day, eventually, you would learn what he was talking about, whether you wanted to or not. And that is what made the Bray Wyatt character so genuine and believable. That is why I believe Bray Wyatt is the Shakespeare of pro wrestling. Bray Wyatt would spend time in NXT developing his character as this smooth-talking cult leader, giving lengthy speeches about followers, the people, what was right, wrong, power, and all manner of things that would sound right at home being espoused by the likes of Jim Jones or David Koresh or any other cult leader. These would initially sound like nonsense gibberings, but the more you heard them, the more they would make sense, and before you knew it, you were a follower of the Wyatt family. Bray Wyatt's charismatic presence and performance was so convincing that before long he would have followers in the form of Eric Rowan and Luke Harper, two massive men who played their roles as devotees brilliantly. Rowan was like this giant who would look for instruction and appeared to have no will of his own, a man who was seemingly brainwashed into carrying out Wyatt's orders. Harper played the role more like a true believer. Dressed in jeans and a filthy white tank top, he would often pause to look at Bray for approval, and sometimes just stare at him with the wonder of a young boy looking up to his father. Both men, despite saying almost nothing, did an unbelievable job of making this Bray Wyatt character believable, and their own characters just as believable as his faithful devotees. And this made the Wyatt family gimmick, in my opinion, one of the best gimmicks to ever hit the WWE. Bray himself created this with his mic skills and his pageantry in the ring. Some people are critical of Wyatt's in-ring skill, saying he was slow and limited. He was certainly no high flyer like Jeff Hardy, but I think these criticisms are a little unfair. You see, wrestling is about telling a story in the ring, as well as on the mic, and I believe Wyatt embodied his character so fully that the way he wrestled was perfectly suited to the character he played. The first thing to know is that Wyatt didn't get in the ring all the time. Initially this was actually because of injuries, but it worked out incredibly well because it allowed him to do a lot of talking whilst his followers did the fighting. And Wyatt would sit menacingly in a shabby old rocking chair watching these two fanatics destroy their opponents on his behalf. Oftentimes, Harper and Rowan would interfere in each other's matches when the ref's back was turned, just like a good heel always does. But when Bray entered the ring, he would put on a display that really told you who this guy was. Let's go back to that incredible introduction he made back in 2012 on NXT, when Bray Wyatt first got into the ring. It was hard to know just what to expect. He was a pretty big guy, so you might expect some big slams, powerbombs, suplexes, and a few big meaty slaps to his opponent's chest. But what was displayed in that ring was far more than simple wrestling moves. Bray would dominate the match from start to finish. He would throw those big heavy blows and slams, all while smiling and chuckling to himself, mixing the theatre and pageantry with the in-ring performance. This really did seem like watching this deranged cult leader fight someone, rather than a straight-up wrestling match. He appeared to be a sadist, revelling in the violence he was enacting. It was surreal to behold as Bray Wyatt transformed from a charismatic but eccentric man in a Hawaiian shirt and wicker hat to this wall of flesh that relentlessly hammered at his much smaller opponent, Aiden English. It was as if a switch had been flipped in this man's head, a switch that shut off all empathy, all mercy, all humanity, and allowed the true personality to emerge from this enigmatic cult leader, a personality of violence and control. For all the talk he'd done, encouraging people to follow him and be saved, here was the truth of Bray Wyatt. Like all cult leaders, he wanted power and control, and if he couldn't achieve them with words, he would do so with his fists, and he delighted in it. While this match was nothing exceptional to begin with, in fact, it's not entirely uncommon for a new wrestler to debut and dominate a match. This lets the audience know they are serious, and could pose a threat to the more established wrestlers on the roster. But it's not so often a debut match is quite as dominating as Bray Wyatt's. But what made this match speak to me on a deeper level was the finish. After bludgeoning Aiden English for almost 5 minutes, Wyatt throws him into the corner. His opponent is practically out on his feet, and then Wyatt charges at him from the opposite corner and slams his body into him. Then, as English struggles to stay on his feet, Wyatt takes him by the hand and begins dancing around the centre of the ring with his limp carcass, and the look on Wyatt's face is one of pure joy. In the middle of the ring, he sets up a move where he tucks his opponent's head through his arm facing upwards, positioned so that Bray can look down at his victim, right before he executes what would become known as the Sister Abigail, his signature manoeuvre. But right before he hits this move, he leans in and kisses his opponent on the forehead, the way a parent might kiss their child goodnight. And the match commentators are stunned, speechless by what he's doing. It's such strange and odd behaviour. And then, after what looks to be a kind act of compassion, he hits the move so fast and with such a slam, this doesn't feel like a wrestler's finish, but more like an execution. Finally, Bray Wyatt goes for the pin, and when he does, he practically crawls across his opponent, cradling the man's head in this bizarrely protective position. This makes me think of the way a parent might cover their child if the roof were to collapse in on them. And that's how the match ended, and I think many people weren't too sure of what they had just seen. The strange acts of compassion and eccentricity, rolling around the ring with a big smile on his face, dancing with his opponent, the kiss to the forehead, and all of it mixed in with these incredibly violent acts. One thing was clear though, Bray Wyatt was not to be taken lightly. Over the months spent at NXT, Bray Wyatt would become more and more popular as his eccentric character would share his philosophies, build the Wyatt family, and decimate his rivals. Then it happened. The Wyatt family was called up to the main roster for WWE and would soon be appearing on Monday Night Raw. On his last appearance on NXT, Wyatt informed the crowd that he would be moving to Raw with Harper and Rowan, thanking them and ending his promo by singing the lines, "Time is on my side," a song by Kai Winding, but famously covered by the Rolling Stones in 1964. And this moment confirmed to me what I suspected. First of all, that Bray Wyatt was a fan of the Rolling Stones, but also that Bray Wyatt was a fan of Randall Flagg. Who was Randall Flagg? Randall Flagg was a recurring character in many books by the acclaimed horror author Stephen King. In his book, The Stand, Randall Flagg is the main villain and frequently sings this same set of lyrics to himself throughout the book. And wouldn't you know it, he too was a smooth-talking cult leader with a soft southern drawl. This is the kind of thing that makes me love Bray Wyatt's work, constructing this character and occasionally dropping little hints to his inspiration. Interestingly enough, he would also refer to himself later as the Eater of Worlds, another line from another Stephen King book, It. The thing is though, Bray could do all this on NXT due to the creative freedom offered by WWE's developmental show. However, moving up to Monday Night Raw would mean working with WWE's creative team, and that would mean less control over his character. How would Windham Rotunda handle this? A clearly passionate and creative man who had worked hard to bring Bray Wyatt to life, now facing a future where people without a full understanding of that character would be involved in everything he did. There was the risk that this character would just fall apart. As it turned out, Bray Wyatt would have a very strong start in his time on Monday Night Raw, when he and the Wyatt family would begin by targeting none other than the Big Red Machine, Kane, as their first victim. Kane was an absolute legend in WWE, hailing from the 90s Attitude Era. A fan favourite and known for his demonic persona, he was a perfect fit for the Wyatt family. And this was a very smart decision creatively. Not only was Kane a veteran wrestler, known for supposed superhuman strength, but he has, for the majority of his time, wrestled in a mask as a kind of horror movie character, something very much in line with Bray Wyatt's gimmicks. The Wyatts would attack Kane over the course of several weeks and cut promos in the ring, threatening him and telling him to follow the buzzards, a line that became somewhat synonymous with Bray Wyatt. Eventually, the stage would be set for a match between Bray and Kane, and not just any match, a Ring of Fire match, or an Inferno match as they are sometimes called. This would see the entire ring encircled by a kind of fire-emitting pipe. These kind of tools are used a lot in filmmaking as a way to safely emit flames on camera, but in WWE, they're a spectacle, letting the audience marvel at the cinematic battle between two men as the world burns around them. It's all very hellfire and brimstone, the sort of stuff that looks cool, but ultimately limits what the wrestlers can do in the ring. In previous Inferno matches, the stipulation had been that to win, a wrestler had to set a part of his opponent on fire. Yes, there are some crazy things the WWE has done in the past. This, of course, was usually done with the theatrical flair of wrestling, where some pretext would occur during the match for a wrestler to disappear under the ring and apply some form of fire protective prosthesis to themselves, such as in the 1997 Inferno match, where Kane came out from under the ring with one of his arms looking very deformed, as he was no doubt wearing some kind of fire protective sleeve. He would then have his arm set alight and run backstage, where, again, no doubt, fire extinguishers and medical staff were waiting. The Inferno match between Bray and Kane, however, did not have this stipulation. The fire around the ring was itself used as part of the story, a way to keep Rowan and Harper from interfering. During the match, Bray put up a fight as good as anyone, but the Big Red Machine dominated the majority of the fight. Each time he would slam Bray to the mat, the flames around the ring would erupt, giving the match that spectacle to hide the fact that the actual wrestling taking place was very limited. This limitation is understandable, as of course Bray Wyatt and Glenn Jacobs, the man who portrays Kane, are both in fact human, and as such probably didn't want to get set on fire. And I can only imagine the heat in that ring as they wrestled. But this is again a part of how the match tells a story. In this case, it was the story of Harper and Rowan desperately trying to find a way into the ring and save their Messiah. They would try to throw weapons into the ring, only to have them catch on fire, and as Kane continued to dominate the match, Harper and Rowan would manage to smother the flames along a portion of the ring with a heavy fire blanket, just as Kane hit Bray with a massive choke slam and went for the pin. Diving into the ring with no regard for their own safety, Harper and Rowan would break up the pin, saving their leader, and then begin taking Kane apart. Finally, Bray would deliver a Sister Abigail and get the pin. It's a great piece of storytelling, where in the end we see that even the most powerful wrestlers, those who can dominate even a powerhouse like Bray Wyatt, cannot stop the fanatical devotion of the Wyatt family. Think about it. Even all the fires of hell couldn't keep Rowan and Harper from protecting their leader. What took place after the match cemented what the Wyatts were all about. Rowan and Harper dragged Kane from the ring, while Bray went and sat in his rocking chair. They took the ring steps and set them up in front of Bray like a sacrificial altar, or more accurately, a chopping block. Then, with Kane bent over the altar, Harper and Rowan used the other half of the ring steps like a guillotine. Right as they raise the steps, Bray delivers a final, chilling line to Kane. "You made your bed, and now you burn in it." Which was possibly a reference to the song by Midnight Oil, "Beds Are Burning." But whether it was or it wasn't, Wyatt's words were so full of malice, and so appropriate for Kane, the demonic wrestler who had always been associated with fire, and had in fact taken part in every Inferno match up to this point. And after the delivery of that line, Rowan and Harper brought the steps crashing down on Kane's head, making him a sacrifice to Bray Wyatt, the new face of fear. Of course, in reality, the ring steps have a huge groove cut into them, and they never touched Kane. But to those watching in the audience, this brutal act of violence, punctuated by the sound of metal crashing off metal, would have been quite something. After this, they would drag the battered Kane backstage for some sinister purpose. I would have thought this would lead to Kane emerging as a new member of the Wyatt family, but he didn't. Instead, he just kind of disappeared. This match stands out to me as a way in which Bray Wyatt performed a kind of human sacrifice that actually made sense within the wrestling world. And that's how the feud with Kane came to an end. After the feud with Kane was over, the Wyatts would attack a few other wrestlers, seemingly at random. This would help re-establish them as a threat to everyone. Kane never joined the Wyatts, he just sort of disappeared, and I think that was a bit of a shame, as it would have given them that extra bit of intimidation, having yet another giant of a man fighting in the name of Bray Wyatt and his unhinged philosophies. Eventually, the Wyatts attacked a wrestler named Daniel Bryan. And again. And again. Unlike the random attacks, it now seemed the Wyatts had found a new victim. Once again, Bray would cut these promos of rambling cryptic warnings and philosophies. It soon became apparent Bray wanted Bryan to join the family. And of course, Bryan, who was a very popular babyface at this point, resisted. Over the next few weeks, the Wyatts' attacks would become relentless, as they attacked him backstage, after matches, even during a couple of matches, I think. Bray would not be denied a new brother, and if he had to beat Bryan into submission, he would. Something else happened at this point though. The Wyatts began to show weakness in some of their matches. They didn't outright lose many, but on several occasions they looked sure to be defeated, particularly when top star and infamous rebel of the WWE, CM Punk, got involved, coming to Bryan's aid. This clued the audience into the fact that the Wyatts were not unstoppable, they could be beaten, and Bryan and Punk would be the ones to do it. But a good wrestling story always has a twist in the tail, and this one would be no different. The stage was set, a tag team match with Punk and Bryan on one side versus Rowan and Harper on the other, with Bray watching on from his customary rocking chair at ringside. Throughout the match, it seemed like anyone might win, but in the end, Bray Wyatt himself got involved in the match, resulting in a disqualification. However, that didn't matter to the Wyatt family, as they continued their beating long after the bell rang, and the beatings continued even further over the next months, with more attacks and more matches, almost always involving Daniel Bryan. The family would then continue their assault on Bryan in the ring, with Bray grabbing a microphone, would tell Bryan,
"I have no mercy left to give. It could have been different. It could have been better. It could have been perfect. And this is your fault. I'm going to punish you. I want you to open your eyes. Open your eyes and look at your dismay. Open your eyes, Bryan. This is the end."
Very much embodying that abusive cult leader and delivering these lines in a way that would really have you believing this man was heartbroken at what he had been forced to do. And then it happened. The crowd was no doubt expecting an attack by Punk or Daniel to fight back. The good guys would surely win out in the end, right? Instead, Daniel Bryan said two words that shocked everyone in attendance that night.
You're right. Say it again. Say that again. You're right. You were always right. Let me join the family.
And then, struggling to his knees, he spread his arms out wide in a show of fealty to his new master. Bray Wyatt had enlisted a new brother to his family, and the crowd were not happy. Boos and cries of shock rang out through the arena. This wasn't supposed to happen. How could a fan favourite like Daniel Bryan, a plucky underdog with the babiest of faces, be beaten into submission and pledge his allegiance to this cult of psychopaths? Bray embraced his new brother amidst the jeers of the crowd, and then suddenly, and without warning, would deliver a brutal Sister Abigail to Daniel Bryan before hauling him away. This is a fantastic moment, as not only had tragedy struck as the Wyatts turned Bryan to their cause, but that final Sister Abigail was the cherry on top that told us even if you joined Wyatt, he would keep you in your place with violence. He truly brought to life that abusive cult leader persona. And what's more, it didn't feel hokey like The Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness from 15 years before had. Don't get me wrong, I love The Undertaker as much as the next wrestling fan, but during the late 90s, he would also do a cult leader gimmick where he would recruit other wrestlers. The thing is though, that cult, the Ministry of Darkness, relied on the satanic dark magic of The Undertaker, and even involved its own human sacrifice type stuff, with wrestlers being literally crucified in the ring. Although of course, they used ropes instead of nails. It was a fun gimmick, but it didn't exactly feel real, because, well, magic isn't real. But Bray Wyatt was magic. Bray Wyatt was true magic. His hypnotic speeches and savage beatings, administered by himself, Harper and Rowan, these were magic. A brutal, real magic, that if you hit someone hard enough, if you confuse them enough, then they will believe what you say, and they will join you. And sadly, this has throughout time and history proved to be true. You could really believe these three men had tortured Daniel Bryan physically and mentally to such an extent that he gave in and joined them. This is what hurt the audience so much. Bryan had joined the Wyatts voluntarily. He had given up, and that was not what people wanted of Daniel Bryan. To understand what made this so important, we need to take a moment to look at Daniel Bryan. You see, Bryan wasn't what you would expect of a fan favourite in WWE. He was a relatively small guy, not even 6 foot, and didn't match up to the meat behemoths that people were used to cheering for. But his wrestling skills and fighting spirit shined like a light in the dark, and the more people saw him, the more they loved him. But wrestling is a tough business. Promotions often want to make their own stars, and so when a wrestler naturally gets themselves over with the crowd, it can ruffle a few feathers backstage. I don't know for certain, but I suspect Daniel Bryan was one such star. And so, this storyline placed him firmly out of the limelight, where he would be in the shadow of Bray Wyatt. But not for long, as it would turn out. Sometimes you have to keep watching a wrestling story for the ultimate payoff, but wrestling fans are not shy about voicing their opinions. Now, I don't know if this story was changed due to fan backlash, or its resolution brought forward, or it was always planned to go this way. But what did happen over the following weeks was a development that would lead to the ultimate catharsis for Daniel Bryan and his fans. A week later, Bryan would take part in a 6-man tag match alongside Harper and Rowan, and this time the Wyatt family would lose. After the match, Bray would get that unsettled look in his eyes that often preceded an act of ruthless violence. But his target was not one of the opponents in the tag team match. Instead, he entered the ring, had Bryan kneel before him, and delivered another brutal Sister Abigail to him. This told us, the audience, everything we needed to know. Bryan was a prisoner of this violent, sadistic madman, and Bryan was the one being held responsible for the loss, and as such, it was Bryan who would be punished. This calm display of punishment, delivered in a way that said, "This is for your own good," would encourage sympathy for Bryan, a broken man now at the mercy of his captor. Not long after this, perhaps only a week or two later, Daniel Bryan and Bray Wyatt himself would enter the ring together in a steel cage match against the Usos, one of the more popular tag teams at the time. To win, both men would have to exit the cage before their opponents, and once again, the Wyatt family would lose. Despite Harper and Rowan being outside the cage and doing everything they could to prevent the Usos escaping, they failed. But, despite this being the failure of Harper and Rowan, Bray still chose to punish Daniel Bryan. This was becoming a cruel display. Bryan, noticeably the smallest of the 4 members of the Wyatt family, was clearly now the punching bag of Bray Wyatt, there to be punished for any failures of the family. Bray was exposed for what he was, a very charming and manipulative bully. But then, something happened. As Bray Wyatt goes for the Sister Abigail, Bryan slips out, and now, in an act of pure defiance against his master, rips off the boiler suit he was wearing to reveal his own ring gear underneath. The crowd erupted with cheers. Harper and Rowan erupted with disbelief, banging on the cage walls and doors to get in. Bray erupted with anger, going to attack Bryan, but Bryan got the better of him, fending off his attacks and beating him down. Daniel Bryan finally began to climb the cage, inch by inch, escaping both his figurative and literal prison, until finally he sits atop the cage wall with arms raised in triumph as the crowd go absolutely ballistic with cheers. This is what I mean when I say sometimes pro wrestling makes you wait for that fantastic story finish. And even if you're not a fan of pro wrestling, anybody could appreciate the story that was told here. It was such a work of genius to have Daniel Bryan join the cult for those few weeks. It would have been okay to see Bryan refuse the cult, but to see him indoctrinated and then beaten and abused, and then finally break free after exacting some vengeance on his cruel master. This was a defining moment, not just for the plucky underdog who had proven himself to have an unbreakable spirit, but also for the Wyatt family themselves. Now, we knew Bray Wyatt's charisma and charm could be overcome. The Wyatt family was not infallible. Their armour had well and truly cracked. After this, Bray would make some promos, calling out Daniel Bryan as a traitor, and this would ultimately lead to a one-on-one match at the Royal Rumble. Bray Wyatt would score the victory here and cement himself as a still very credible threat, but this would mark the end of their feud, for now at least. The feud with Bryan would ultimately catapult Bray Wyatt to being one of the top heels in WWE, and now, with that feud behind him, he would need to find himself a new target. This led to a few face-offs and beatdowns, most notably against The Shield. The Shield was a three-man group consisting of Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, and future star of the company, Roman Reigns. They were a dangerous group who would enter the ring through the crowd dressed in SWAT gear and deliver a vicious beating to whoever their target was. This was a perfect fit for the Wyatt family, both teams not afraid to resort to dirty fighting. And the Shield embodied this rigid, militaristic sense of order, while the Wyatt family embodied the destructive randomness of absolute chaos. Their feud, however, was only a short-term one, as the Wyatt family's real target through all of this, the man they had been gunning for, was John Cena. Probably one of the most popular babyface wrestlers of all time, John Cena was beloved by fans, and being in a feud with him meant the Wyatt family had really made an impact. Bray Wyatt's enigmatic personality, fantastic character work, and brutal in-ring style had carried Windham Rotunda to the top of WWE. This is a true credit to Rotunda's brilliance at creating a gimmick that could have easily been a cheesy, forgettable failure in the hands of anyone else. It is no surprise that Bray Wyatt is often compared to The Undertaker. It takes a special kind of person to pull off these horror movie style gimmicks in the world of wrestling to such a degree that they reach the top of the company. Bray Wyatt had done this so well, and one aspect of that was his fireflies. When Bray Wyatt came out to the ring, he would do so carrying an old gas lantern, making a very deliberate and slow walk to the ring. Most importantly, the lights would dim, and in the darkness, a sea of fireflies would light up the arena. These were the lights on the mobile phones of audience members, held up in the blanket of darkness like a sea of stars. Bray would ingeniously dub them his fireflies, meaning when you held up that light, you were pledging allegiance to the Wyatt family. This act would become synonymous with Bray Wyatt throughout his career, and made for a visual spectacle that showed everyone watching just how much support he had from the fans. I'm not exactly sure when this became a thing with Bray Wyatt, as it evolved naturally over a period of time, but I'm pretty sure it was happening by the time he was in a feud with John Cena. The Cena feud would mark the pinnacle of the Wyatt family gimmick, as they were now going up against the face of the company. This meant they would not be able to dominate Cena the way they had Daniel Bryan, because although we'd seen a small crack in the Wyatt family's armour, John Cena would be wearing the reinforced plot armour of the WWE writing team. That being said, the Cena storyline was handled pretty well, as the Wyatts attacked him backstage and post-match. In the beginning, they would get the upper hand over Cena, but soon he would start to turn the tables, at one point ambushing them in the ring by donning a boiler suit and sheep mask, similar to what Eric Rowan would wear. The Wyatts, uncertain of who this new devotee was, would be attacked, and of course the mask ripped off to reveal John Cena. Unable to dominate Cena physically, Bray would rely on his mic skills. He would cut promos calling Cena out as a false prophet, selfish, and seated alone at the top of his castle. John Cena is also known for his fantastic work on the microphone, which led to some truly brilliant verbal sparring. But for me, I think John Cena met his match here. He was very good at wordplay and scathing insults, but his words would ring hollow in the face of Bray Wyatt's rambling yet insightful speeches that exposed who John Cena really was. As a quick aside, John Cena is currently, in the year 2025, doing his retirement run in WWE, and having taken a heel turn, I find myself wondering if Bray Wyatt's deep-cutting truths served as inspiration for Cena's heel persona, as it seems everything Wyatt said about him back then has proven to be true in his current behaviour. But back to the point. The Cena feud would escalate to a point where, after a vicious beating, Bray Wyatt would cradle the battered Cena in his arms, and this is the moment he struck gold. Wyatt would begin singing "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands" to the unconscious Cena.
In his hands, he got the whole wide world. In his hands, he got the whole. the whole world in his hand. He's got you and me.
His pitch rising and becoming more maniacal with each repetition of the chorus, until this spectacle seemed to truly be that of an unhinged crazy man capable of anything. This scene also works on two levels. First, it can be seen as Bray Wyatt mocking Cena. As the face of the company, Cena did have the whole wrestling world in his hands. But now, here he was, battered and broken, in the arms of a man he once called a Duck Dynasty reject. But it could also be seen as Wyatt celebrating his control over the wrestling world. Having Cena in his arms, under his control, this metaphorically told us Bray Wyatt now held the whole world in his hands, dictating the future course of wrestling from here on. Of course, this wasn't the end of things. This just raised the stakes in this feud, and soon things would come to a head in another steel cage match. Just like how things had reached their climax with Daniel Bryan, so it would be again with John Cena. Only this time, something was different. Cena wasn't in a team with Bray, as Bryan had been, and he certainly wasn't escaping the Wyatts, as Bryan had before him. Instead, Cena wanted Wyatt in the cage, where he would be trapped, and Cena would be able to put an end to the twisted cult leader. But right from the offset, things didn't go Cena's way. When Bray Wyatt made his entrance, the lights went down, as they always did, but instead of his usual entrance music playing, the arena was filled with the eerie sound of children singing "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands." The lights would return to reveal an entire choir of kids on stage in black robes. Bray would emerge and lead them on a march toward the ring, directing their singing as he went, a mad conductor with a twisted orchestra of brainwashed children. An unsettling sight for everyone watching as they encircled the ring and donned sheep masks. This scene shows Bray Wyatt was at the peak of his power, having a whole army of children dedicated to his cult following. If John Cena couldn't stop him here, the next generation would be under the sway of this madman. The stakes were higher than ever. The Wyatt family might not just take over wrestling, but maybe the whole world. Okay, maybe it's not that grandiose, but I love this entrance for its sheer, unsettling display of power that really makes Wyatt out to be this messiah-like figure. The match went as so many of Big Match John's matches went. It would look like John Cena was up against impossible odds, but then he would never give up. He would hustle, loyalty and respect his way to victory would get him there. Well, all those things, and of course, a big healthy dose of WWE's plot armour would get him through. During the match, Wyatt and Cena threw everything they had at each other, and in the end, Bray was knocked out in the middle of the ring, while a battered John Cena crawled desperately towards the open door of the cage. Victory was just a few feet away. All he had to do was crawl out. Then, just as he reached the precipice of freedom, the lights in the arena cut out. A deep, distorted voice began singing that familiar line, "He's got the whole world in his hands." The lights came back up, and a young boy stood in front of Cena, singing into a microphone. He is the source of the distorted voice, and John Cena looks utterly dumbfounded. Then, Wyatt would recover and grab John from behind. John Cena had lost, and it seemed Bray Wyatt really did have the whole world in his hands. Now, the ending to this match is a little bit goofy. Why would Cena be so scared of a kid with a voice modulator? Of course, this was supposed to be something supernatural and creepy, but on this occasion, it took that one little step too far. I thought the processional choir to the ring was a work of genius, and it probably gave this local church choir, or whoever these kids were, a story to tell their friends too. But the one kid with the scary voice, well, it was just a little bit silly. Also, I feel like this kid was meant to be a shocking reveal, like it was Cena's own son or something, brainwashed into joining the Wyatt family. But I'm not actually sure who it was, or if there was anything important about this kid. Anyway, despite the finish, the match was pretty good, and was one more feather in the cap of Bray Wyatt's use of character and story that brought some added depth to the ring. This match would set the stage for Bray Wyatt's biggest moment, WrestleMania, the biggest wrestling event of the year, and if you were on the card at WrestleMania, then you had well and truly made it in the WWE. Bray Wyatt wasn't just on the card, he was on it and up against Cena again. This would be the decisive match for Wyatt. Win, and he would decisively place himself at the top of the company. Lose, and Cena would remain its figurehead. This was a battle for the soul of WWE. Could Cena put an end to the sinister machinations of this swamp-dwelling, self-appointed saviour of mankind? Or would it be doomed to follow the buzzards into the embrace of the new face of fear, the Eater of Worlds? He saved it. Of course John Cena saved it. In an outcome that surprised no one, John Cena won. But that didn't mean the match didn't have meaning. This match very nearly had the perfect finish. Nearly. After another clash of the Titans, John Cena was once again struggling to attain victory. Bray Wyatt was this inhuman masochist monster, seeming to feed on the attacks Cena dished out. And as things came to a head, Wyatt would thrust a steel chair into Cena's hands and kneel before him in his signature pose, arms spread wide, and with the smile of a deranged lunatic on his face, Wyatt would tell Cena to do it, to finish him. A good wallop with a steel chair would have no doubt been enough to end Bray Wyatt at this point. But if he did that, John Cena would have been admitting to the whole world on the grandest stage of them all, he couldn't beat Bray Wyatt by himself. This match had no special stipulations, and so if Cena used that chair, he would be disqualified. It could be the end of the Wyatt family, but everyone would forever say Cena had to cheat to do it. He could never have beaten Bray clean. He was right all along. Cena was always just one big phony. John couldn't do it because Big Match John was also a big match babyface. It's kind of a rule in pro wrestling that babyfaces don't cheat. They win by out-wrestling their opponents with sportsmanship and talent, and probably the power of friendship and kindness too. For a babyface to cheat or play dirty would be to stoop to the same level as a heel. Heels, on the other hand, have no such issues, interfering in matches, using weapons, distractions by creepy-voiced children. No, let's not go back to that. We can all just forget about the creepy kid scaring John Cena so much he couldn't crawl 2 feet to victory. But moving on. While Cena struggled with the choice before him, the referee watched on, shouting things like, "Don't do this, John, this isn't you." Wyatt played the heel to perfection, with his encouragement and temptation begging for the hero to swing the chair and prove that Cena was just like him. This would have been kind of like getting Cena to join him, to admit he could be pushed to do the unthinkable. And I wish the match had ended this way. It would have made for a hollow victory for Cena and added some shades of grey to his character. Instead, Cena tossed the chair aside, quickly out-wrestled Bray, and hit him with his finishing move, the AA. That got Cena the pin, and a clean, decisive win over Wyatt. Now, this wasn't the end of their feud, but it was the beginning of the end. This defeat shattered Bray Wyatt's aura as a near unstoppable force of nature. Over the next few months, all three of the Wyatt family would begin to lose more frequently. The feud with Cena wasn't over though. There would be more matches with various wrestlers and tag teams, including another little spat with the Shield. But ultimately, it all led to one final destination, a last man standing match. Last man standing matches are the ultimate test of endurance. The only way to win is to knock your opponent down and for them to stay down for a count of 10. In the world of wrestling, this can be quite a creative win condition. And here, it was to be used in just such a fashion. Last man standing matches are no disqualification, so this time round, good boy John Cena would have no qualms about smashing a steel chair across Wyatt's back or using any trick in the book. I suppose that referee was wrong when he told Cena, "This isn't you." It turns out Cena can easily be that guy as long as it doesn't stop him from winning. But what happened at the finish of this match was quite something. Fighting outside the ring and around some equipment cases, Cena would manage to slam Bray straight through the top of a case that was laying on the ground. He would then topple another case over the one Bray Wyatt was laid inside, essentially trapping him so it was impossible for Bray to stand up before the 10 count. This was the cheapest way imaginable for Cena to win, but the commentators tell us it's a smart move, not cowardly or desperate, but tactical and smart. And maybe that's true, but it seems far more like the move of a heel than a babyface to me. I wonder if Windham Rotunda was a bit unhappy with this finish for his character too, as he makes no effort to showcase Bray's usual resilience. He doesn't attempt to push the crate off him or anything, he just lays there waiting for the 10 count. John Cena had literally buried Bray Wyatt. This is kind of prophetic. In the world of pro wrestling, the term burying someone refers to management, creative teams, or sometimes other wrestlers doing something that basically kneecaps another wrestler's career. This isn't necessarily a malicious act. Sometimes the creative team writes a story that doesn't land, and as such, that story and wrestler are just shuffled way out of sight. So when Cena literally buried Wyatt, it was not really a surprise that he struggled to rebuild that unstoppable momentum. He would go on to have some minor feuds, but was losing more and more. Meanwhile, Harper and Rowan were struggling the same way, appearing on less prestigious WWE programming and losing matches to tag teams that they would have once dominated. This could have spelled the end for the Wyatt family, and for a time it did, when Bray Wyatt quite suddenly released Harper and Rowan from his cult, just like that. For seemingly no reason, he just let his devotees go. And while both men could have been impressive stars by themselves, Eric Rowan never really picked up any steam. Luke Harper did win the Intercontinental Championship, but it was a short-lived thing. And as for the enigmatic cult leader himself, well, now he was a shepherd without a flock. During the time the Wyatts were on the decline, injuries didn't help them, as both Rowan and Harper would each be taken out of action for extended periods. This did give Bray the opportunity to recruit a new member to the family. Braun Strowman, one of the newest big men on the roster, would don a black sheep's mask similar to Rowan's. However, his would be used to mark him out as the so-called black sheep of the family. Several months later, Rowan and Harper would reunite with Bray, and they would rise back up the card. They even took part in one of WWE's forays into a more cinematic style fight, when they had a brawl at the Wyatt family compound against the New Day, which was really just kind of an old barn in the woods where Wyatt appeared to record many of his promos.
And although this match may not have been the best wrestling match in the world, in fact it's arguable it wasn't even a wrestling match, it showed Bray Wyatt's creativity and willingness to take things outside of the wrestling ring and attempt to create a more cinematic experience for the viewers. It was something that perhaps didn't receive a lot of praise, but it was something interesting, and at the very least, something different, and a sign of the creative capabilities of Windham Rotunda.
And then something happened that was quite unexpected, although in hindsight, it probably should have set the Fireflies' alarm bells ringing. Randy Orton joined the Wyatt family. Randy Orton was one of the biggest single stars at the time, and although he kind of went back and forth between face and heel, Orton was never a specifically evil character. So his decision to join the Wyatts was an odd one, but it meant something new and fresh for the storyline. So with Orton at their side, the Wyatts rose higher on the card, until finally Bray Wyatt gained ultimate recognition. Bray Wyatt finally won the WWE Championship and had reached the very top of the ladder. As a quick aside, one thing I really liked about Wyatt was how during this time championships weren't a massive part of his stories. They didn't really fit the crazy swamp cult dynamic, and Bray Wyatt was more interested in the possession of people's souls, not shiny belts. But when championships did enter the picture, such as when Harper and Rowan would become tag team champions, Bray would refer to them as symbols of power, which made perfect sense from the perspective of a cult leader. It's as if the belts were coveted artifacts with religious significance, something to be placed on an altar and worshipped. It's a testament to Bray Wyatt's creativity that he was so effortlessly able to take the idea of title belts and make them fit in perfectly with the character he had built. So, back to our main story. Bray is world champion, and Randy Orton is now one of his stooges. But then the inevitable happened that really everyone should have seen coming. Randy Orton betrayed Bray Wyatt, showing footage of himself burning down the Wyatt family's compound and then striking his silly signature pose, a celebration of what was clearly an extremely babyface act, arson. This set the stage for a confrontation, Orton versus Wyatt for the World Championship on the grandest stage of them all, WrestleMania. In yet another unsurprising outcome, Orton won. Bray Wyatt had the World Championship in his hands for less than 2 months. What an incredible waste. And this was it. Orton buried Wyatt, perhaps even deeper than Cena this time. Though perhaps it is more fair to say WWE Creative buried him. It's not like Randy Orton decides who gets to win matches. And that is pretty much the story of Bray Wyatt's first run in the WWE. He proved himself popular with the fans and a very memorable heel. His work on the microphone was a mix of captivating and terrifying. Well, maybe not terrifying, but unsettling to say the least. His ring work might not have been the best in the business, but it was certainly good enough to entertain, and the powerhouse moves fit his violent sadist personality perfectly. This is why I hold Bray Wyatt in such high regard. He fully inhabited the character he created and made him feel real. He moulded and formed a gimmick that could have been cheesy, outdated and out of place, and made it work in and out of the ring. The Bray Wyatt character was like watching a horror movie villain, perfectly crafted to fit into the world of professional wrestling. By all accounts, Rotunda deserves a lot of credit for this too, as he was very protective of his character and heavily involved in the story development. Most wrestlers are given characters and stories, and it's up to them to make it work. Rotunda, on the other hand, would bring his ideas to the creative team to such an extent that he was regarded as kind of difficult to work with. Not to say he was disliked. In fact, nobody seems to have a bad word to say about him, and he seemed very much loved by both fans and his colleagues backstage. Anyway, that's all I have to say about the Eater of Worlds. But this wouldn't be the end for Bray Wyatt. There is a more fiendish story to tell, but that is a story for later, when the WWE would let him in.